Okay. I love the fact that I got 6 computers and like all these eye hole devices. Yeah, I said eye hole. And yet I'm using like an old chalkboard from like Little House on the Prairie. This is going to be the ultimate goddamn video on filters. And I really, really believe, actually I'm now 100% certain you should watch this. Because this is going to like, wow, it's going to fix everything. And it's going to be really, really simple. First, I want you to click the link below. And it doesn't matter if it's a bare array or an X-trans array. You'll see I've taken a shot in a normal black and white on the Fuji X100T, but this applies to all digital cameras, okay? It doesn't matter if it's a bare array or an X-trans array. And then I've taken a shot with I used a green filter, and then I used a red filter. Now what you're doing, obviously, is a red pass filter. Yeah. Obviously, it's letting more red in. Reds end up looking brighter for obvious reasons. What you're doing is you're actually choking the sensor and the information, and you will very, very quickly notice it's like, you know, these are all shot at the same ISO and shutter speed. Actually, there was a little bit of exposure compensation. That's not true, a little bit of exposure compensation on the red filter. But the same exposure, but they're more pixelated. It's a picture of a tree trunk. You could do this anything you want. This is, you know, you shouldn't be buying these sort of filters for your camera. All you're doing is, remember back when I bought a motorcycle and there are all these BS emissions regulations in America, and the first thing that you would do is when you bought this motorcycle, it was a Yamaha Seika 2, and is that you needed to go in there and, you know, drill a hole in there because the engine wouldn't work properly, new on the showroom floor, so you had to pay someone a couple $100 to make it work correctly. Isn't that bullshit? But that's government regulations. The only thing you're doing is you're taking a camera and you're choking it when it comes to digital photography. This is great for film. Now there are appropriate filters, and we're going to go over them, and I made it really simple. They're the 3 T's. No one's ever made a video like this. It's going to be so fucking simple. People are going to go, oh my god, it's as simple as it gets. Now I understand. But if you take a look at this image, the image below, you'll see that the red and the green, the images are not only lacking in detail, but they're also heavily pixelated because you're choking the sensor off of the information that it needs to make, you know, a correct image. I mean, you do that stuff in Lightroom. Do that stuff in Photoshop, okay? So these filters, no dice. Now, you're about to say, well, what about an infrared filter, which is basically like a really pitch dark red filter? That's correct. That's an exception. So we're going to go over those now. There are only 3 appropriate filters, and they all go by a T, so that way you can remember it. I had to make them all a T, but you'll vary. Time filters, type filters, and trajectory filters. Now, they all had to be a T to make it really simple, right? So, what would be a time filter? That would be an ND filter. It should be called an ambient illumination filter. Okay? Because all exposure is gain and time. Aperture, shutter speed. ISO is applied gain. Okay? ISO in digital photography has nothing to do with the image. You ever heard of ISO invariance? Okay. So forget ISO. I've already made like 100 videos on that topic. Gain and time. So a time filter. All 3 of these are the only real, you could use some special effect BS filters like a 6-point star filter and all that. So, I mean, those are still, you know, acceptable filters. Whatever you want to make the image look fine, they're certainly obviously acceptable. But really, these are the only 3 filters for digital photography. A time filter, so we understand what a time filter is, right? An ND filter, a neutral density filter. It's actually choking off 3-stop, 4-stop, 5-stop. Should not really be using anything more than a 5-stop. And beware of shooting sunsets because there's more light passing through your camera lens than visible light. That's why people's sensors get destroyed. You're like, well, it's really dark, so I'm doing a time exposure. I'm using like a 5-stop ND filter. I did a 30-second exposure of the sunrise or sunset a few times. Now I got a permanent image burned on my sensor. Yes, because more than visible light was passing through that. People don't realize that when they use an ND filter. It's like, well, I'm choking off the light. You know, this is the correct exposure. I don't know why I burned my sensor. You burned it because more than just visible light is passing through that thing. high energetic light, ultraviolet, right? So, an ND filter should also be called a flash pass filter. Why should an ND filter be called a flash pass filter? Why does the Fuji X100T, for example, X100F, all the same thing, have built-in, real physical, drops down, 3-stop ND filters? It crushes the ambient light, and the maximum output on most speed lights at full blast power, I mean all of its juice, is 1/1000th of a second. So, by bringing that ND filter on, which is 3-stop ND filter, it is curbing the exposure, so you're able to open up your aperture nice and wide. But your flash is able to get through. Obviously, your flash is being quelched by 3 stops also. It's quelching everything by 3 stops. But your flash is not really reliant upon time. Why? Well, it is above 1/1000th of a second if you're using high-speed sync flash photography. But most high-speed sync flash photography is 1/1000th of a second or less. So your full blast, your flash is able to get in there. Yeah, of course, you're not always going to be shooting full blast, but anything below that too, in power, depends on what the T1 time of your flash is. Like half power could be the full blast of the half power of the flash could be 1/4000th of a second. So it should also be, ND filter should also be called a flash pass filter. So we have time filters appropriate for digital photography. The second is a type filter, infrared. Or if you do like a full spectrum conversion, that means the camera is bug-eyed for everything. So if you want to shoot, you have to buy some specialty filters. Since it's now a multi-spectrum exposed sensor where you actually have full conversion, you're going to have to use filters like infrared or UV filters to expose the camera to one spectrum or the other, or you could just leave it off and use like an ND filter and do limited exposure. Full conversion, full spectrum conversion cameras are really fun. But for general people, just like an R72, which is short for 720 nanometers, which is near infrared, is the easiest type of infrared photography. So this would be a type filter. In other words, it's only letting in, it still lets in visible light, but basically not. Have you ever seen what a R72 filter looks like? It's like 10 times darker than this. You could like hold this up to the sun if it were a R72, which I got in the back room back there. Really, 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 really dark. Really dark. Some cameras are no good for using that filter. The Fuji X-T2 is the tits for infrared photography. Just awesome. I love infrared photography. So we have a time filter appropriate for digital photography. We have a type filter, okay, like infrared filter, okay, because you can't actually do in Photoshop a type of infrared look, but there's nothing that beats the real thing. It doesn't come close to the real thing. Lastly, since I had to have another tree, we got a trajectory filter. What would that mean? It means it's only letting a certain trajectory of light in. This would be a polarizer. For digital photography, you want a circular polarizer. Now, a polarizer is serving two functions. It's also working as an ND filter. It's cutting and curbing the light, usually by 2+ stops. Depends on who makes it. Polarizer, trajectory. It's only letting in certain polarization. The front of the lens. I don't know if you ever use a polarizer. Turn it in. It's especially very, very useful for doing any sort of stuff on the water. Sunrise, sunsets, haze, dew on the meadow. There's 1,000 things. Buildings especially. Big thing on glare on buildings using a circular polarizer. So very appropriate for digital photography. So we basically have 3 types of filters. There are some very, very, very fine exceptions for this, but basically not really, like 6-point star filters and some other freaky deaky stuff like that. But we really only have 3 types of filters for digital photography. A time filter, okay, ND filter basically, right? Or what I've always called a flash pass filter. Serves 2 purposes. It crushes the ambient illumination. But I mean, you could crush ambient illumination by changing your damn exposure. The other type of time filter too, and this is very important for landscape photography, is a gradated ND filter. It starts out as an ND filter, like a 3 or 4 stop, and then it starts lightening up until it goes to clear. Use those for landscape. Those are square filters like Koken drop-in filters. You stick the adapter on the front of your lens, you drop it in, you align it properly. That way you're crushing the ambient light coming over the hill, whatever, wherever your dish is shooting. Gradated ND filter, really important for landscape photography. Okay, so that's a time filter, or a flash pass filter. You know, it's to compress the dynamic range of your shot, and also lets you do other things. Just type in ND filters. If you don't know anything about ND filters, you should know a lot about ND filters already. Type filters, pretty simple. Infrared filters. It's letting in a type of light. It's acting as a pass filter for infrared. I mean, those filters are like blacker than a cat's butthole at the bottom of a coal mine at 3 in the morning. It is amazing how well the Fuji X-T2 works with an infrared filter. It's the tits. Everybody has a Fuji X-T2. Now, only certain lenses work properly with infrared, by the way. Some of them have hot spots. So you got to be careful of that. I've made videos on that before. Like the 23mm f2 is perfect for that. 35mm 1.4 is perfect. There are a bunch of other lenses. And lastly, trajectory lens. It's only letting in a certain trajectory of a type of light. Polarization. You know what polarizers are. You can make them for sunglasses. Like you used to see those commercials back in the day. Oh my god, I put on my polarized sunglasses. I can see so much better driving down the road. So there we go, folks. This is filter photography for digital photography in a nutshell. There really are only 3 types. Time, type, and trajectory. I think I did a bang-up job on this video because no one else explains filters for digital photography, because everybody's always questioning, what is good for digital photography? They don't know they don't know if this filter, whatever it is, a red filter or some freaky deaky filter, like transcends its way from film into digital photography. They're like, does it make it? Is that filter only for film, or does it go all the way to digital photography? Most get like this. This is film. Film, unless you want to do something really freaky deaky. You know, anything goes in photography. Whatever makes the image that you want. If you want your image to look kind of shitty and screwed up and red looking, or, you know, whatever sort of, you know, it's art. Everything goes. It's whatever you want. But generally speaking, no. No. Film. That's stuff. But those types are okay. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, drop me a buck or two. Tell me to jump off a cliff. Whatever makes you happy. 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 Right. Whatever pets your pickle. Yep. Just like that. Right. It's been a tough day today, actually. Whew. Damn. Crazy. My phone's been ringing off the hook, too, man. Man, I swear to God, every time I sit down, and I only eat once a day, believe it or not. Every time I sit down to eat, someone calls me. Bring! Damn it. I can't stand it when that happens. Or the best thing now is lately, people like to call me when I'm still asleep. And once you wake me up, that ticks me off because I can't get back to sleep again. It's like, don't call me when I'm sleeping. Don't call me when I'm sleeping. Man, I'm already sleep deprived enough as it is. Don't call me when I'm sleeping. Thank you for watching. Catch you later. This has been the video on filters. Thank you. Bye.